I want to start this episode with a question. When you think about having to set a limit, draw a boundary, make a request with someone in your life, how do you feel? What types of feelings get kicked up? What if you need to say no to someone? How does that make you feel? Do you ever feel anxiety about setting a limit or saying no, especially if you're someone who says yes a lot? So that's exactly what I'm going to be hitting in this video. Why you feel this way and what you can do to overcome it so that you can become a boundary boss. If you are new to my channel, I want to say hi and welcome. Please introduce yourself below in the comments because we love to know who is here. And please subscribe to my channel. All you got to do is hit the bell so you get notified whenever I do a new episode. If you don't know me, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the author of Boundary Boss, which you can get right now at boundarybossbook.com. Came out on April 20th, and it is selling like hotcakes. So if you want to get it, that's where you go to get it. I want to say thank you so much for your questions and all of your interaction here because I read every single one of them. And I want to shout out to Sophie Malakovic. She wrote this under my video, which is Stop Constant Conversation Interrupters. That was the episode that she wrote this under. Terri, thank you so very much for this. Seeing you put your hand up like that blew my mind. I'm practicing putting my hand up now, sitting by myself, realizing I've never done this and didn't know I could. I can't wait to read your book. I feel it will change lives. So thank you so much, Sophie, for being a part of our community and for writing that really nice comment. I appreciate you. Before we get started, make sure if you're watching this that you subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that you get notified and you don't miss a thing. Now let's move into today's episode where I'm going to be hitting anxiety and boundary setting. Shall we? We shall. Let's start with why does it create anxiety for us? What is anxiety provoking about setting a boundary? What are the things that put us in this position to have it be stressful? Well, one thing is you have to ask yourself, are you a people pleaser? Do you lean towards that where you don't want to make anyone mad? You don't want anyone to be upset. You have a tendency perhaps to say yes when you want to say no. A lot of outside validation seeking. Listen, you may just consider yourself a nice person, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to give you some questions in the downloadable guide that I've created for you that will go along with this episode. A couple of questions that you can ask yourself to make the distinction of how much of the disease to please do you have. So if you say yes when you want to say no, if you prioritize everyone else's needs and wants above your own, if you avoid conflict at all costs, and if you apologize when you are not sorry. So I'm going to give you all of that in the downloadable guide so you can get an idea of how badly you may or may not have the disease to please, because we're really trying to get the baseline of where you are right now, because that will help me help you to get to a point where you can start to make these boundary requests or set a limit with more ease and grace and with less stress. Other things that create anxiety for asserting ourselves in our relationships. And before I go on, I want to get clear that when I'm talking about you having healthy boundaries, I'm talking about you knowing your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, and having the ability to communicate those things in your relationships, personally and professionally, when you so choose. So that is my definition. And I think it's important that we're all kind of working on the same definition of what it is to have healthy boundaries, because it has everything to do with effective communication, right? That is really the foundation for becoming a boundary boss, is knowing how to effectively communicate. Codependency. So that's the second big block that creates a lot of anxiety around effective boundary setting, is if you are interacting in a codependent way. If you are doing more than your share in your relationships, maybe you are an overfunctioner, which means a lot of the people in your life might be underfunctioning. Codependency, what it really means is that you are overly invested in the feeling states, the decisions, the outcomes, the circumstances of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace, maybe your physical well-being, maybe your financial well-being. So I'm going to make that distinction because, listen, we all love the people in our life, right? So it's not to say you should not care what's happening with them, but if what's happening to them feels like it's happening to you, that is relating in a codependent way. So when it comes to codependency, I'm going to ask you to check your own urgency around what's going on. If you jump into fix-it mode the moment someone tells you about a problem or an issue that they're having, and suddenly it feels like you now are having that problem or that issue, you have to really check yourself and sort of step back, because codependency, I mean, the sheer nature of what codependency actually is means you have disordered boundaries. And so if you've been very used to and conditioned to overgiving, saying yes when you want to say no, doing more than your share, let's say, but also feeling overly responsible for the people in your life, that will definitely create a lot of anxiety around setting limits, right? And that is what having boundaries is. Remember, we're talking about your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, meaning your non-negotiables. So if you are never setting limits, we know that you are, have disordered boundaries, and a lot of times that comes along with being codependent. So of course, it's going to kick up anxiety for you to think about starting to set limits. Because a lot of us, especially in codependent relationships, when you really think about it, when we are behaving in this codependent way, this is a covert or overt bid for control. We don't want that person to relapse if they're drinking. We don't want our grown kid to make that mistake. And we're trying to control the outcomes for other people. But I want to go on record as saying right now, if you are dealing with other adults, I'm not talking about minor kids, their outcome is theirs. And if you are married to that person, of course you can be concerned. But again, you're still two different people. So even if what's happening for them will impact you, it's still their situation to manage, whatever it may be. So I'm not saying you can't talk about it if you're in a partnership with that person. That's different, though, than jumping into fix-it mode. Another reason creating boundaries can create anxiety is that it's new. So much of the time, I hear from you guys writing in and sending in comments and saying, I didn't even know that I had a choice, that I was allowed, quote unquote, to have boundaries. So I want to drop in, and in the downloadable guide that I created for you, I'm actually going to put in the Boundary Boss Bill of Rights. So with the Boundary Boss Bill of Rights, it's really important that you understand that you have a right to certain boundaries, that I think they are, all of us have that right to have healthy boundaries and to be able to share what our preferences, our desires, our limits, and our deal breakers are. And if we don't, what you're really talking about is that the people in your life, they don't really know you. And I think that that is super important to really figure out, that we feel like we're being nice, right? When we have the disease to please, like we're being nice. We don't want anyone to be upset, right? We don't want people to be mad at us. We want to give to people. And all of that is great. You can give to people and still not necessarily abandon yourself, because when you're abandoning yourself, you're really not helping the people in your life. So I'll quickly go over them and I'll make sure that we drop them into your downloadable guide. You have the right to say no or yes to others without feeling guilty. You have the right to make mistakes, to course correct, or to change your mind. You have the right to negotiate for your preferences, desires, and needs. You have the right to express and honor all of your feelings if you so choose. So if you're talking to an emotionally unsafe person, perhaps you wouldn't choose to share all of your feelings and give them that access to you. You have the right to voice your opinion, even if others disagree. You have the right to be treated with respect, consideration, and care. You have the right to determine who has the privilege of being in your life. You have the right to communicate your boundaries, your limits, and your deal breakers. You have the right to prioritize your self-care without feeling selfish. And last but not least, you have the right to talk true, be seen, and live free. So those are your Boundary Boss Bill of Rights. And we've created a beautiful little downloadable, like it's a PDF that you can, no, it's not a PDF, it's an image that you can actually upload to have it as your screensaver for your phone or on your computer, because I want you to remember that you have those rights, because it is so easy when you're in the moment, especially if starting to set limits and establish boundaries or enforce boundaries is something that is new for you, that it's so easy in the moment to be like, am I being unreasonable? Is it me? Do I have a right to this? So it's really important that you remember that these are your rights, which again is not saying that we have a right to control or judge the crap out of other people. That's not what that means. It means that we're responsible for our own feelings, for our own situations, for our own side of the street. And the more that we tend to that and not be tending to the entire neighborhood, which is what we do when we're overgiving, codependent, people-pleasing, right? It's all focusing outward. It's important that we're also focusing inward, because you can still be a loving person, obviously, and take care of yourself first, because then you're not burdening others with that responsibility, which is really important. So the last thing I want to say about this is that there is a lot of anticipatory anxiety when you start to make decisions that you're going to set limits, or you're going to make a simple request, or you're going to share a preference with the people in your life. There is so much projection that goes on, which means that we envision, right? We do all of this future tripping of how the person is going to react and respond. And it's really important that we control our minds, that you're not that fragile. The people in your life are not that fragile. And that once you really get that you have a right to ask for what it is that you want, or to set a limit with someone, it's much less anxiety provoking. And we also realize, like, the last piece of this is that people don't have to acquiesce to what we want, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Understand that your healing and your growth is in the sharing of who you are. It's in the asking for what you want. And then really being a boundary boss means that we can be in acceptance. If this person may not be able to do exactly what we want, maybe we negotiate, maybe we change it up, but we can't do any of that if we're not saying what's on our mind. So the age of silently suffering is really over. And it's so important that you know yourself, and that you're really upping your self-care, that you are dialing into how you feel, because your body's wisdom is always there to tell you what's going on. if a boundary has been crossed, or if someone says something that is offensive to you, or that you want to talk to them about. You don't have to do it in the moment. You can do it after the fact. You can do it a week later. But you've got to be dialing into how you feel physically, and also understand that with the projection and the anticipatory anxiety, those things haven't even happened yet. So instead of thinking like, oh, this is just like that last time that I asked for something and it was terrible, we have to really be like, okay, now is not then. This is happening now. And allow yourself maybe to have an uncomfortable moment with someone. Like, everyone is going to be okay. We can all survive an uncomfortable moment. It's all going to be okay. So I really want to know what your thoughts are about this episode. Which of these, the reasons for anxiety, really resonated with you? What are your aha moments about this process? And, please be upping your self-care, because simultaneous to this journey of you becoming a boundary boss has to be you falling madly and deeply in love with yourself and taking amazing, amazing care of yourself. That is what really must happen, because you won't have the bandwidth to do it if you don't take incredible care. So, thank you so much for spending time with me today, because you know how much I love it. I hope you have an amazing week, lessening any anxiety about drawing boundaries. And as always, take care of you.